So we enter the new year in the knowledge that in 2023 it will be the final year of Frankie Dettori's race riding career. Without question, horse racing's brightest and biggest star, not just in the UK but around the world. We could be here for hours talking about his life and all of the memorable moments he's had. He is a proper superstar in horse racing and in sport. Over the Christmas break, he announced that this coming season will be his last, and it's going to be a year-long victory parade befitting the man. So, time to reflect. Adam, where do we start?
Well, all the way back in 1987, I think where we start is when Frankie's dad, also a leading jockey in Italy at the time, sent him over to the UK, and he's never looked back. Rode his first winner as an apprentice in 1987, a three-time champion jockey in the UK. He rode all 7 winners on one day in Ascot, famously Frankie's magnificent 7 way back in 1996, costing the bookmakers millions of pounds back then. He's had 20 UK Classic wins, big race wins all over the world. A near-death experience in a plane crash in the year 2000, believe it or not. Drugs bans, controversies, appearances on proper primetime TV back in the day as well. As you said, we could be here all day, but racing will miss him. That is for absolute certain.
And I must say, I've got a lot of time for this year-long retirement parade. Reminiscent of Raymond van Barneveld in the darting world. Of course, he came back, but I don't know if there's much danger of Frankie reversing his decision. If we look at the here and now, why is he calling it a day at the end of 2023? Why now?
It's been coming. It wasn't really a surprise when it came at Christmas. I think they had some racing abandoned over Christmas on one of the Saturdays or one of the days in between, and I think it was a good PR opportunity really for him and ITV Racing to filter the news through on a quiet day in racing. But he's 52 now. He's been riding winners in the UK for 35, 36-ish years. It is quite remarkable, really, in a sport where there's so many injuries and the weight cutting. Or keeping your weight low for all that time. It is a hard life. But he has been openly cutting back on the last few years, concentrating on quality rather than quantity. That probably went a little bit too far in the last couple of years. John Gosden, has told him so, and they had a bit of a falling out. But total UK rides in 2022, he had 200, bang on 200, 37 wins. 40 of those 200 rides were at Ascot alone. Another 35 were at Newmarket. So it might not quite be the retirement parade that some of the smaller UK tracks will be hoping for to cash in on some Frankie fever. Will he be going to Pontefract on a Sunday or a Monday? Probably not. Will he be going to Pieman's homeland at Carlisle for a few rides in a flat maiden? Almost certainly not. But I mean, look, 200 rides last year. The year before in 21, it was 197 rides. It was 160 in the COVID year of 2020. It's been coming. Let's have it right. I mean, as a comparison, William Buick, the champion jockey of last year, he had 750 rides. And as we said a few seconds ago, Frankie only had 200 in the same year. But yeah, it's just how we've got here. He's had such a glittering career. He's been the standout personality of the whole sport for decades, for years and years.
It's not all been on good for him though, has it? He's had his fair share of blips.
He has, but I think in the eyes of the public, I don't think he's had much wavered in his reputation in the eyes of the general public, the racing public maybe, but I don't think there's one other personality, particularly in the UK racing, that other than Frankie Dettori, I don't think the man on the street would be able to name. I really don't. Trainer, jockey, or maybe even horse. I really don't. I think jumps racing particularly is bereft of personalities at the moment. With AP McCoy's retired, Ruby Walsh, etc.
Certainly on the track, anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, on the flat, I would say there's a few coming through, but does the man on the street know who O'Shea Murphy is? Or do they know who, Ross Ryan Moore? No. But Frankie Dettori, he was back in the day, he was on, was it Parkinson, This Is Your Life, proper, even when, before I can really remember, really, proper primetime TV superstar kind of thing, not just, turning up on Dancing on Ice one week or whatever it's called, dancing, whatever they call it on BBC nowadays. But yeah, in 2012, Frankie and Godolphin fell out. One of the most successful retainers in the history of racing between owner and jockey in those famous all blue silks. It did coincide with a failed drugs test at the time. He got a 6 month ban, and he got caught cocaine in France in and around the Arc Trials Day, I think it was. So yeah, you'd have been forgiven really at that time in 2012,
I was
serving
going
a
to say that would have finished a lot of people, wouldn't it? Something like
well,
that.
yeah, serving a ban. He was 42, 43-ish, serving a ban at the time. His retainer from Godolphin had been removed. Yeah, you'd be forgiven to think that that was the beginning of the end for Frankie, but he gave his old mate John Gosden a ring, and in 2013, and it pretty much never looked back for the pair of them, really. A remarkable successful spell, which produced all sorts of Group 1 winners from Golden Horn, Enable, Annapurna won the Oaks, Two Dawn Hot, loads, a hatful. And yeah, it just came at the right time for both of them. It was the first time that John Gosden had won the title for many years, the trainer's title for many years. Frankie was a big part of that. At the time, I think William Buick had switched over to Godolphin, so he'd left Gosden and gone to the boys in blue, and Frankie was going the opposite way. It just fell perfectly for both of them. They had fantastic success. They fell out for a matter of days last year in 2022 from around Royal Ascot, and it got blown well out of proportion. I remember saying that at the time to you guys on the channel. But yeah, just everywhere you look, there's a story to tell. They have already made a bit of a biopic film about him. But I mean, like I say, from even it's way before my time, Pie, when I was still at school, when he's had a car crash. Sorry, the plane crash, nearly died. So the pilot did die. Just an unbelievable story. Big race wins all over the world, from America to Dubai, and everything in between, really. And the Dubai World Cup with Dubai Millennium, the horse named to win that race, Dubai Millennium. Yeah, an amazing story everywhere you look. We could be here all day.
Yeah, he has, and he's transcended generations, hasn't he? Which is something that I mean, to be still going in his 50s, you wouldn't really get that. I mean, this is a physical sport, but you compare it to, I don't know, football, um, tennis, anything that requires sort of extreme physical fitness. They're gone long before their 50s, and even it's only kind of golf and not non-physical sports, darts, snooker, etc., where you would consider somebody still to be, at the top of the sport as well. I mean, it's not, as you say, it's reduced his quantity, but he's still right there in all of the plum events.
Well, it's the
So
weight making as well, Pie Man. I mean,
exactly, yeah, it's absolutely brutal for him physically. Yeah, you can
I've
only
been
you can only admire it.
I've been lucky to spend a bit of time in and around weighing rooms, and I am a regular customer of the. I'm lucky enough to go to the Ascot Jockeys Canteen. I spend probably way too much time in there for someone that's never even sat on a horse. And I walk in, I pick up chocolate bars, sausage butties, I'm picking up lasagna off the hot counter. It's beautiful. You're so well catered for there. And these jockeys are going in and getting there's literally bowls of wine gums, and they pick up one or two wine gums, or they're just having a chicken breast. They don't even drink water. You see them walking around with their little cups filled with ice, and they're like eating ice as a kind of an eating process to kind of con the mind into think that they're eating, but really they're only taking on water. They'll stand on the scales and do a weight check hours before they're due to ride. They'll do a weight check, and in their head compare or contrast they reckon half a bottle of water, so your 500 ml bottle of water,
Mm.
is about a quarter of a pound, and obviously a full bottle of water would be half a pound. So I've seen jockeys literally ask the clerk for an official weight check. They get on, they see the thing on the screen, and they think, right, I can take a little bit more, and they will get off and have a drink of water. It's like what you see the boxers really when they weigh in
Yeah.
on a Friday. As soon as they get off the scales, they have water. But the boxers are doing it. There's no limit. Once they've weighed in, there's no limit. The jockeys have got to make weight 5, 6, 7 times throughout the day. It's a lot. I mean, I wouldn't last one day on their diet. I really wouldn't.
No, neither would I, unsurprisingly. Just to sort of bring us back, I suppose, and look forward a little bit. We have got this one season left for Frankie. I do wonder, what has he really got left to achieve in this season? This is literally just going to be a goodbye, farewell, and wave into the crowd, or do you think he's actually going to be targeting achievements in this final year?
I think it's not going to be much different to what he's been doing in the last 2 or 3 years. The rides have been decreasing, quality over quantity. I think that'll be pretty much the same. It's been picking up in the last few years. It's been picking up. It's almost been second choice jockey to Coolmore and Aidan O'Brien in the UK. So in that time, he's rode an Oaks winner for him. He's rode a 1,000 guineas winner for him on basically on the second choice Aidan O'Brien's. But how often do we say that a lot of people would cut their right arm off to be able to ride the so-called second choice? Snowfall being a perfect example in 2021, won the Oaks by 16 lengths, a record, and Frankie was on that day. But in the UK, the only Group 1 he has not won is the July Cup. Obviously, as the name goes, 6 furlongs in July at Newmarket, Group 1. So we can expect Frankie to have a plum ride for that this year. At the turn of the year in the specials, there was some 12-1 knocking about that Frankie would win the July Cup on whichever horse, just that Frankie would win it 12-1. I doubt that's still available. I'm not on, but it sounded like a bit of a trading angle to me because you cannot see Frankie Dettori riding a horse that is 12-1 or bigger on the day in July.
I'd be amazed if he doesn't go off favourite for the race, to be honest.
Yeah. So we'll have to look out there. But yeah, I don't think much will change really in practice to what he's already been doing. There's already a lot of eyeballs and cameras and interviews every time he walks on a race course. So that'll obviously continue and maybe increase a little bit, particularly towards the end of the season. But it could be a little bit not anticlimactic, but false almost, because his last ride will not be in the UK. So let's, for example, think that he's going to be riding at Ascot Champions Day in the middle of October, and then he'll be going. His last ride is likely to be at the Breeders' Cup, which I think this year is in Santa Anita. I'm no expert on the Breeders' Cup, but I think that's in California. So again, befitting a bit of a Hollywood finish. Another thing to look out for this year, there's actually a horse due to go in training as a 2-year-old now called Lanfranco. It's the first foal out of a horse called Coronet that Frankie rode to Group 1 victory for John Gosden. That won a French Group 1, I think. But out of Coronet by Frankel. No word on who's going to be training the horse Lanfranco yet, but it would be something to see Mr. Lanfranco Dettori riding the horse called Lanfranco.
It would, yeah. Let's hope that's not a dud. Doesn't always guarantee success, does it? The pretty breeding, but it does sound like it'll be a prospect. You talk about interviews and a lot of media and press attention. That's only going to increase as we get closer to his final days. I wonder if we might get a little taster of him on doubles and trebles. Highly unlikely, I appreciate, but I know you won't like me saying this, but you've spent a little bit of time around Frankie, just being in and around racing over the years. What can you tell us about the man, sort of, I guess, away from the limelight?
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky, really. He's a completely different man when he steps over that white line onto the pitch or whatever, or, out of the weighing room, into the limelight, into the parade ring. The cameras are on, the fans are watching, and the connections. He's absolutely brilliant with different connections and different owners. Because moving away from the Godolphin job, he's not only riding for just one set of owners now. Even with John Gosden, he's got all sorts of different owners in there. So, just completely just switches it on when he walks over that white line, and then behind closed doors, if you like. And particularly, the first time I was lucky enough to be around jockeys was in that the COVID. We're still in the COVID era, if you like, in 2021. In weighing rooms, and just very, very different business-like, more professional, and that's. But when he steps over that line, the smile comes on, and we all know the it's not that act is the wrong word, but we all know the persona that Frankie is. I mean, it must have been difficult to be the most popular man in the sport for decades on end, like. There really has not been anyone else on the flat that has surpassed him, ever. There hasn't. I mean, Lester Piggott was pretty much, edging towards retirement or in jail by the time Frankie started out. There's no one's got anywhere near him, and everyone wants a slice. From plonkers like me asking for a selfie the day that he rode John Leaper in the Epsom Derby in 2021 and finished nowhere, absolutely nowhere. And he was watching the replay thinking, and it was the first time I'd kind of met him. So I took that opportunity and, probably wouldn't do the same again now, but just everyone wants a slice of him. I was lucky enough in the Goodwood Cup in 2022 was in between the period of where him and John Gosden fell out, and that was he didn't ride Stradivarius, and it was the first time in Stradivarius in about 17 starts for Stradivarius. They'd won, I think they'd won 9 or 10 Group Ones together, and Frankie wasn't riding, and all the cameras, if you like, were trying to peep into the weighing room to try and get a picture of Frankie, as if to say, "Oh, he's not riding. Look, does he look a bit sad?" So we was in a little bit of a room where the window could see out to the parade ring, but you couldn't see in. And I was just sat there with a young colleague, and Frankie walks in, like just as they're loading the stalls for the Goodwood Cup, and I'm there ready to do my work, and Frankie walks in, and I was like, and I've spoke to him a couple of times just to say hello, nothing, not family friends, and "Hey, are you all right?" And my colleague sitting next to me is like, "Oh my God!" Like, and I said, "Have you come in here to get out of the way?" And he said, "Yeah." And it was pretty quiet. We had work to do. He was obviously watching at the race, and it was a cracking race as well. I don't like staying races, but the Goodwood Cup last year was one of the races of the season.
Oh yeah.
With Frankie, Kyprios, and there was one other Trushan as well.
Went
And
right to the line, wasn't it? Yeah.
They all three of them came down, and they all had it was a brilliant race. And he was kind of happy that Stradivarius ran well, but yeah, just surreal. Like 3 of us sitting in the room, little old me, the apprentice, and Frankie Dettori. It was a bit mad. But I have seen the bad side as well, if you like, because on Champions Day at Ascot 2021, sorry, there was a pretty infamous incident with a young jockey called Dylan Brown McDonough, who came over and rode a Joseph O'Brien horse. Something which he did later apologise for publicly. He got kind of cut up again. It was on Stradivarius, found a bit of trouble in running, and he blamed the young Irish fella. He didn't do anything wrong really, and he was coming into the weighing room, giving it a bit, out of the public view, we're giving him a bit of a dig, and he was only 17, the young lad, and it was a bit out of order. It was reported as such, and he did apologise, to be fair.
Yeah, well, I mean, you go that length of time at the top of the game, you're going to have your dark moments, aren't you? But I think he's certainly outweighed the good with the bad, and yeah, I think a lot of these sportsmen, it's impossible to be. I think you do have to have a switch that you could turn on and off, because when you're in the public eye that much, it's bound to be draining mentally and physically, I think. But if we're looking back at what is an unbelievably long and glittering career, what would your favourite Frankie Dettori moment be?
Now, this is going to look a setup, Pie Man, because for the purposes of this video, it's going to look a setup. But genuinely, the best ride I've ever seen with my own eyes, probably the best 2, actually, but the best ride I've ever seen. I don't actually get to watch that many races with my own eyes nowadays, because I'm normally bunkered away in weighing rooms watching on a TV like you are at home. But I was at these 2 events as a punter. The standout is the 2019 King George, Enable versus Crystal Ocean. I think it was Enable winning the King George for the 2nd time. Drawn widest of all, 4 wide after 2 furlongs with no cover. Frankie decided to drop Enable back about 10 lengths off the lead just to get some cover around Swinley Bottom. Started to close the gap on the rivals coming around the bend, and a proper ding-dong battle nearly every single yard up the straight with Crystal Ocean, the 2 market leaders. Crystal Ocean, I think, was 2nd or 3rd best horse rated in the world at the time. On top in the last half a furlong or so. And it was typical Frankie, really, because he was a little bit cute at the line. He was giving it a bit of a fist pump on the quiet, hands and heels for the last 3 or 4 strides. But every stride before that was proper neck and neck. And it was summed up perfectly by the commentator. I think it was Ian Bartlett on the day, who just said that was a horse race. It was fantastic. I watched it actually with SD as a punter. I think probably the last time I watched a race at Ascot as a punter, and had no money on at all, not a single penny on any horse. And I just remember they had like these little, when a horse kind of catches the imagination of the public. It don't happen often in the UK. They had like Enable like paddle boards, like a little lollipop stick, and people around the parade ring was like Enable. And I just remember shouting, "Go on, Frankie," like that. And like I said, didn't have a penny on. I think she was 5 to 6, something like that on the day. But yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. Special memories. What was the other one? I've got to ask you. I mean, yeah, you said just 2 rides. We could be here all day, as you said.
Yeah. So this probably Enable would be the question if anyone asked me, regardless of whether I'm talking about Frankie Dettori or not. This one is classic Frankie Dettori. on that day where we won on Enable against Crystal Ocean, back in third that day actually was a horse called Wild Geese, pretty much forgotten at the line, but
Won the Arc.
went on to win the Arc. So I mean, yeah, really, really quite impressive. But the other one would be possibly Golden Horn, particularly as I was there. 2015 Arc. I mean, Golden Horn had turned up. It was kind of not revitalized, but brought Frankie back to the almost the front pages, or definitely the back pages of the sport. Golden Horn, he'd won the Epsom Derby, he won the Eclipse. Frankie was on both. He won the Champion Stakes in slightly controversial fashion in Ireland, but he still went off as big as 9-2 in the Arc versus the brilliant Trev, who was going for a third win in the Arc. Trev was even money. And that price, a lot of it was due to a nightmare draw. Golden Horn was drawn 14 of 17 at Longchamp. Usually, you scrub your anti-post ticket up and put it in the bin. But it broke away on terms and deliberately raced down the centre of the back straight, at least 10 whips away from everyone else. At least the camera had to pan out. Golden Horn looked like something had gone amiss, to be honest. He's covered at least 2 furlongs before he tacked over, and he got in behind Trev's pacemaker. So suddenly Golden Horn had gone from the worst position in the worst draw, or drawn wide, to the best position, because after 2 furlongs, completely 100% due to Frankie Dettori, he was sat in a plumb position behind the pacemaker. Trev was struggling to get cover, but that's nothing to do with Frankie, and it never really looked in doubt, to be honest. Golden Horn, it was one of the best Arc winners of this century, underrated horse, and not one that I ever really got right or backed, to be honest. Golden Horn, but Trev did make a move coming up the straight to win with the third Arc on her mind, but it was too late. Frankie and Golden Horn were long gone. I think he won by 4 or 5 lengths on the day. That day, I was stood with Hump, who came on the channel last week to talk about the Dublin Racing Festival. And this wasn't too long after Frankie had, made the switch to Gosden and returned from his ban, etc. Was he finished? Was he not? And I turned to Hump and I said, "What's he doing? Has he lost the plot? He's so far wide." But there was good reason for it. How wrong was I? And honestly, an amazingly ballsy ride in the biggest race of all. It was fantastic stuff. You should go back and watch that. But since then, we've seen another. I think someone tried it last year, not to the same success. But we've seen since a couple of others, jockeys and horses, have tried that since the Golden Horn route of the Arc. We've seen it happen 2 or 3 times since then. But Frankie was the pioneer of it, and it was just a brilliant ride.
Yeah, a true innovator and an utter legend. So there we have it. I think we best wrap up, or we'll be here all night. But 2023, the year of Frankie Dettori's retirement parade. Get ready for flying dismounts, montages, gambles, and plenty of smiles along the way, I'm sure. And we'll be covering every stride here on Doubles and Trebles. Thanks very much for watching.